My word, so many good reads. Hello, friends. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us for the National Kidney Foundation's 33rd Annual Authors Luncheon. I'm Liam Maitland. It is my immense pleasure to once again host this event with all of you. I'm happy to join the NKF team in their effort to improve lives for those with kidney disease. Today, we're featuring a remarkable group of talented authors. I have all the books right here. I'm excited to delve into them. I've already started, to be honest. So here are my books. I hope all of you have yours. The authors we are featuring: Walter Mosley, Mary Roach, Pulitzer Prize winner Elizabeth Strout, and Amor Towles. So, friends, before we get started, I'd like to review a few functions of the Hop-In platform. We encourage you to connect with each other using the chat window. So if you're looking at your screen, it's the right side of the screen. You'll find the chat window there. You can also check out the expo area where you can reminisce with videos from the past events and authors as well. And after the event, please do visit the sessions area to connect with old friends and new. Just go to the sessions icon. That icon is on the left, and join one there. The sessions will stay open until 2:30 today. Now, if you're having any trouble, if like me, sometimes technology gets in the way, don't worry. Because if you have any questions about the silent auction or the technology or how to donate, you can go to the sessions area to chat with a live in-person NKF team member. They're there ready to help you. Now, to participate in the silent auction or to make a donation, all you have to do is literally grab your smartphone and, like you're texting a friend, create a conversation, and you will text all one word, authors21. I'm doing it with you right now, authors21. To this number. It's 76278. There we go. I just did it. So one more time, you're going to text all one word, authors21, to 76278. There we go. And then follow the instructions. You can also donate from your desktop by clicking the link at the top of the chat. So go to chat. There's a link right there, and just follow it through. Okay, so let's get things started. First, I'd like to welcome Amy Hewitt. We love Amy. Yes, we do. The Executive Director for National Kidney Foundation, serving Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. So, Amy, you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you, Liam, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Hewitt, Executive Director for the National Kidney Foundation, serving Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. Thank you so much for being with us today. While we would all love to be gathered in a ballroom in San Francisco, as per our tradition, I'm grateful that technology provides this forum to connect. And as you will learn a little later on in our program, virtual does have its benefits. Now more than ever, you inspire and empower all that we do for those facing the challenges of kidney disease. I'm extremely grateful for your support and for the essential ways you've made it possible to enhance the care and improve outcomes for our community. It has been a busy year for the NKF, and it is through events like the Authors Luncheon and your kindness that our progress is possible. I'd like to highlight some examples of how we are putting your generosity to work. Earlier this year, we launched the NKF Patient Network, a national registry to bolster research initiatives aimed at improving patient-centered care. Now, with our global expansion beginning in Canada, we are building an even greater database, which will fast-track better treatments and accelerate potential cures. 2021 started with a new federal law passed to provide lifetime Medicare coverage of immunosuppressive drugs for kidney transplant recipients. And we continue to fight for affordable and accessible healthcare as a critical part of our advocacy agenda. Kidney disease is growing in the US, yet the pace of research funding is insufficient to meet the need. To address this gap, NKF recently released a research roadmap, which, if funded by Congress, would propel innovations in kidney disease treatment and understanding. We are also leading an effort to ensure that 3 new classes of breakthrough drugs, which help slow progression of kidney disease, are made available to our patients and other high-risk groups. And just last month, we introduced legislation that will help more people with kidney disease make use of home dialysis and dramatically improve quality of life. Over the summer, an NKF and ASN task force announced a recommendation for removing the race variable in how kidney disease is diagnosed, helping move toward an equitable system of care for all affected by chronic kidney disease. This is a significant step forward in our efforts to develop a race-free approach to diagnosing kidney disease. These efforts are in addition to the programs we are deploying at a regional level and are just a handful of examples of how NKF and your generosity are helping patients live longer, fuller lives. As you will see today, is about hope and our collective ability to transform lives. Together, we can make a difference. By the close of this program, I am confident you will be both inspired and empowered, knowing that together, we are making the future better for kidney patients everywhere. I want to thank the wonderful people and organization who have made today's event possible. First, this year's featured authors for lending their gifts of their time and talent: Walter Mosley, Mary Roach, Elizabeth Strout, and Amor Towles, and our special guests, Gail Tsukiyama and Michael Krasny, for his decades of dedication to the Authors Luncheon. I promise you're all in for a treat today. And of course, our host, Liam Makelum. Thank you to our gold presenting sponsor, Wilson Dow, our Authors Circle sponsors, Otsuka America Pharmaceutical, Satellite Healthcare, our silver sponsors, Rick and Candy Barnett, and Union Bank. And to all of our dedicated supporters, you have our heartfelt gratitude for your partnership and generosity. We also wouldn't be here today without our local board led by Rick Barnett and our NKF staff. Finally, I want to share my gratitude for this kidney community. You are a constant source of inspiration and continually remind us of the importance of our work and events like the Authors Luncheon. Now, please welcome Sheila Gordon, our amazing Planning Committee Chair. Thank you, Sheila, for your steadfast commitment, which knows no limits.
Welcome. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the 33rd Authors Luncheon. We're so excited to bring you this wonderful virtual program featuring Mary Roach, Amor Towles, Elizabeth Strout, and Walter Mosley. I want to thank those people who made it possible. Our fabulous staff, Amy Hewitt, Patty McCormick, Celine Coe, Doris Liu, and all of the NKF staff. Our Authors Luncheon Committee, as well as the Executive Leadership Committee, led by Jessica Baer. And we cannot thank Book Passages, Elaine Petrocelli and Karen West enough. We're so lucky to have them as a partner, truly one of the country's treasured and unique independent bookstores. And our production team at Wilson Dow, Nikki Incandela, Jeremy Plummer, and Eric Blomberg, are like family. As I said last year, they turn our dreams into reality and helped us reach a global audience this year again. And lastly, this year's event, on behalf of the NKF, is dedicated to the memory of Alan Mendelsohn. Alan was a dear personal friend and a great friend of the National Kidney Foundation. He was a board member of the NKF of Northern California for many years and served as president. He recently was serving on the national board of the directors of the NKF. Alan loved the Authors Luncheon and attended almost every one since the very first luncheon in 1989. So to Alan Mendelsohn, this one's for you. And now, join me to turn the page and we will begin our fabulous program. Thanks, and I hope to see you next year.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you, Amy, as well, for your amazing commitment always to this event and to the NKF. I also want to give a big hug of love to our wine sponsors, our friends, J Law. They always show up big time, show up in caps. Yes, they do. And of course, they give us great wine. So yes, glass of wine would be lovely. Thank you. So thank you all for your commitment and for showing up. Now, for this 33rd annual event, we've changed the format a little bit from years past. The authors will be in conversation with Gail Tsukiyama and Michael Krasny. So Gail Tsukiyama is a best-selling author, you ready for this, of 7 novels and a 2-time featured author at the luncheon. Her last appearance was just last year with her book, The Color of Air. Today, Gail will be talking with Walter Mosley and Mary Roach. So Michael Krasny also is a best-selling author, widely published scholar, literary critic, and an award-winning public radio host with KQED. He's always also one of my personal heroes. Yes, he is. And he too has a decades-long history with the NKF and the Authors Luncheon. So please welcome Gail and Michael.
Well, I'm delighted to be part of the National Kidney Foundation Literary Luncheon again. I've been here many years, and each year is exciting because each year we bring you an array of really top drawer writers, and the event itself is wonderful. Even though it's going to be online, I know it's going to be wonderful again because I have Gail Tsukiyama with me again. Gail, welcome.
Oh, you do this so well, Michael. I'm delighted and honored to be hanging on to your coattails as we interview these wonderful writers we have this year. I'm just learning and waiting and hoping that I can be at minuscule as good as you've been all these years.
Oh, you're too kind. I think these coattails are clearly they're getting pretty frayed, but it's nice of you to say that. And I most appreciate and grateful for those kind words. You really are excited though about the interview process, aren't you?
I am, and I'm excited and nervous, and I'm usually on the other end. So this is new for me in that sense. And you've done it so well over the years that it's frightening a little bit at the same time. But I am very excited, and it's such a good cause, the Kidney Foundation Authors Luncheon. It's one of the events that I think all through the years I've heard writers talking about it. And wanting to be part of it. And a lot of it is probably because of the interviews that you've given them and throughout the years. It always comes off as like such an important event for writers to be part of.
Well, it's a main event of its kind. It's sui generis, to sound like the pedant that I am. I mean, there's nothing like it really anywhere in this country, and authors are indeed, to put it mildly, thrilled when they become part of this, but it's a thrill and has been for me many years to be part of it, and the MC role, and to have you aboard is wonderful. And frankly, we get to talk to some of the premier writers of our time. Plus, as you say, this is a wonderful cause. This is a cause that can't be matched in many ways because we're helping people in so many ways with research, with ongoing treatments, with just an infinite number of things that need to be done.
Well, I'm so delighted to be part of this and to working with you. I wish we were in person, but this is as good as it gets.
It is, and it shall be. Looking forward to working with you again, and looking forward to hearing your interviews, and onward and upward.
Thank you. Me too.
Thanks so much. Onward and upward indeed. And friends, let's now jump right into our first interview. Gail will be talking with Walter Mosley. Walter has authored more than 60 critically acclaimed books, including the Easy Rawlings best-selling mystery series. He published his first novel, Devil in a Blue Dress, in 1990. We know that book. We know the film. It later became a feature film starring Denzel Washington. Since this first novel, he's been exposing, dismantling, and subverting stereotypes. Yes, he has. A tradition he continues in his latest offering, The Awkward Black Man. Please welcome Gail Tsukiyama and Walter Mosley.
I'm thrilled to be with Walter Mosley today, one of the most versatile, prolific, and admired writers in America. He's not only a writer of fiction, but he also writes about writing. And I'd like to talk to him a bit about the writing process, how he's come to develop his characters, how he writes a series continuously with the same characters, and what his relationship is to them. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Describe Walter Mosley as a child.
Well, Walter Mosley as a child is like, it's so interesting, you're trying to come at it. I'm an only child. My mother was an only child. My father was an orphan. I mean, he had siblings, but not until much later in life. And so we were like really, to use a funny word, monadic. We had our separate lives in this house, but it was a really good, upbringing. My parents stayed together. We lived down in South Central near Watts in LA. And it was, it was, I don't know, it was just very nice. I talk, people a lot of times they're talking about, how hard, upbringing is and stuff like that. And I suppose that's why a lot of people become writers and how they become writers. But for me, everything was pretty simple.
I wondered if that's why you've written so expeditiously with so many different characters because you were an only child?
I don't know. That's a good question, because I think that when you are an only child, you play with yourself. You're just like always, making up games, doing things, talking, and imagining people responding. And that could very well have started I think about that every once in a while, but I don't know. I can't say for a fact that that's true, but
Were you a reader as a child? Did you sit in the corner and read books like a lot of writers growing up who are only child or who want to get away from the other siblings? They go in the corner and read a book.
It's such an interesting question. I mean, to think about reading. I read. I like reading. I've always liked reading. I liked books when I was a kid. I read little novels like Winnie the Pooh and things like that. I read comic books certainly my whole life. But I've never really found that reading itself has a lot to do with writing, at least for me. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people who are incredibly well-read can't write a story to save their lives. I know a lot of people who hang out on the corner, smoking cigarettes and drinking wine and telling the best stories you've ever heard in your life. They certainly weren't reading a lot. I have read. I like reading. I concentrate very hard on a book when I am reading it, but I don't think that I would call myself a prodigious reader by any means.
Did you have a background of storytelling then? I mean, you were just saying that you go in the corner and you hear people telling stories. Was your mom or dad a storyteller?
My father was.
About your history.
My father was an extraordinary storyteller, and I loved his stories, and I loved listening to him. And my father loved listening to me. Like if I tried to come up with a story and tell him, he would just stop and completely listen to me. My mother, who's Jewish, her side of the family had some extraordinary storytellers, and so a lot of my life was spent around adults telling stories. Okay. And I had a great time with that. Again, that might be something else that impacted me as a writer, but it's hard to say because when I was young like that, I wasn't thinking of myself as a writer. I was just having fun talking to people.
Yeah, the influences that come from our past, the generations before us, I think when you hear them as a young child, it sticks. I think that's how it came to me to a great extent, just hearing the stories, hearing about cultures that I didn't know and I didn't live in, and how it kind of sneaks into your adulthood. You've created a trunk full of characters. I don't know how you do it. You've written so many books. You write every day. I read, was it 3 hours a day?
3 hours at the most every day. Yeah.
At the most.
At the most.
Why at the most?
After 3 hours, I don't have it anymore. Whatever I write after those 3 hours, I'm going to throw away the next day. Oh. So I just stopped doing it. I said, why am I writing things I know I'm going to throw away? I mean, I throw away a lot that I did in the first 3 hours, but at least there's some gems inside of that,
So where do all these characters come from?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm telling stories, and I'm reaching out for characters. So, well, what's going to happen here? Who's Mouse going to run into? Who's Socrates Fortlow going to meet at the racetrack? And as soon as we get there, then I start talking about a new character, a new name, a new background. It's so much fun to be writing, and things come to me very easily when I'm writing. I just say. As long as I don't try to think about it, I think it's really hard when you try to think about what you're going to write before doing it. For me, I just get lost, so I'll just start writing. I say, well, I want to talk about this guy and he's in this kind of trouble. Okay. And I just start doing it.
So it's pretty stream of consciousness. You're kind of going.
It feels like that. Yeah. It does feel like that. I'm not sure if it's, all the way stream of consciousness, but You know, like, because I might know what kind of story I want to tell. I might know one or two of the characters involved, you know, and I'm trying to work it out. Often, especially when I have a deadline, I outline a story. But even the way I write outline, the same way I would write the novel. So I just go, well, this happened, and this happened, and that happened, and he meets this person, and then he gets in trouble, and he gets out of trouble. I'm just, you know, doing it.
Well, I think one of the loveliest thing about your book, The Elements of Writing, or Elements of Fiction.
Fiction, yes.
Is the fact that the way you describe writing, the way you talk about writing is so easy. And I'm not picking up on Easy Rollins here, but it's so easy and it's so simple. And I think it takes great talent to be easy and simple like that when you are discussing writing. And I remembered that I had read somewhere that somebody had asked you, when do you know a manuscript is finished? And you gave the greatest answer. Do you remember what you had said?
Sure. You know, you write a first draft and you read it and you see all the things that you did wrong, and then you fix those things, and then you read it again, and then you see all the things you did wrong, and then you read it again, and you might see something that you didn't develop enough, and again and again and again, maybe 20 times, maybe 25 times. But at some point along the way, you read what you have and you see the things that aren't quite working and the things that are wrong, but you don't know how to fix them anymore. And that's when the book is finished, because no book is perfect.
Yes, that's the good thing too, that you always end with nothing is perfect. So does the perfection come or closer to perfection when it goes to the editor at that point? And you know that you're finished with that draft and it goes to the next person? Or do you say to yourself, this is as finished as it's going to be? I mean, you're of that esteem now that you could probably say, don't touch my manuscript.
Yes, I can say that. And I've often said it ever since I wrote my first book. I listen, if an editor says something to me and I know it's true, you know, because the editor's job is to know your book better than you know it. You said, listen, you're trying to do this, but when you say this, that actually doesn't lead to this. And then you go, oh, okay, you're right. A lot of times when people start telling you things that it's kind of what they want. It's kind of what they think the audience wants. It's kind of, you know, all of those either personal or business concerns. And I'm not interested in personal and business concerns. You know, I'm not trying to, you know, write a book that, you know, 10 million people are going to buy tomorrow. I'm trying to write the best book that I can that says what I feel. What?
I said, and yet they do.
Well, no, they don't. But I sell a lot of books. It's nice. But, you know, the book is really what I want to say. So I'm not trying to say I don't listen to editors. I do, but very cautiously and very selectively.
Yeah. I also loved the idea that you talked about the child's mind in the book. Would you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I think it's helpful for any writer to hear this, even writers who have written many books, to hear that sometimes you just need to have a child's mind.
Well, I think the child's understanding of the world, which is so immediate, it's so sensual. It's all of the senses. You know, it's your fingertips, your nose, your tongue, your ears, your eyes, all of that. You're experiencing the world in such an immediate way and if you can't keep that experience, then you're going to be further and further away from the subject. Yeah, I just read John le Carré's last novel, written and now published after his death, and just the way he explains how things feel, how they look, what somebody's lips are like, what their arms are like, what the wind feels like, what a person's face is expressing. You know, it's just so gorgeous. And it really is. You see, God, this is, you knew all of this when you were a kid. And I think as an adult, you have to rediscover it in order to make the sensations of a novel.
Yeah, I think that we all carry a lot of baggage too, as you're writing. You know, with the advent of the book clubs and, critics and your editor and, how much money you're supposed to make per book and, all these kind of things, it really kind of deadens the whole creative process. If you allow it in. And that's why I love the idea of trying to keep that child's mind, trying to just be free of like when you said you were growing up. You just had a good time. You'd make up stories on the spot. Your dad would listen to them. It's that kind of mind that we have to keep, somehow. So a reminder of that was really good. I loved hearing it, and I loved the simplicity of just be a child. Let go of all that other stuff. At least while you're on the page, and you're creating your characters.
No, I think it's very true. Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, it's so hard. When people ask me, they say, "What's the best thing about being a writer?" There's no question in my head. It comes immediately to mind. Writing. The thing I love the most is writing. I mean, I like somebody else liking my book. I like a publisher wanting to publish my book. I like it when people say, will you sign this book, or this book meant a lot to me. Love all that stuff. But me sitting there creating on the page, it's so wonderful. You can laugh, you can be excited by, you can say, you can recreate experiences in your life. And it's something everybody can do. I wrote elements of fiction, and also the book before it this year, You Write Your Novel, because I think everybody, regardless of what happens with it, everybody should at least try to write a novel, because that's a way that you can organize thoughts that is particularly and uniquely yourself.
Yeah, or understand your life and how you've lived it.
Yeah,
I do. I agree with you. I've always said that everybody has one novel in them. Whether they write it down or they don't write it down, we all have that novel in us.
But if you do the work, writing it down, thinking about it, rereading it, going over and over again, you're actually studying your mind. On the page, and it's a wonderful thing. I love it, because I learn. I learn. I mean, I learn reading too, but that's a different thing. I love, like Le Carré's novel. Love reading that book.
Well, my last question to you is this then. Describe Walter Mosley today, the man.
Well, older than he wants to be, and happy.
And wiser?
I don't know about that, but I am happy. I'd rather be happy than wise, actually. And I think the most important thing in life is to try to be happy, to enjoy your life, because it's so easy in the world that we live in the bodies that we live in, not to be happy because of, all the debts we owe to people and things around us. And, you just want to try to bring everything in and say, well, I'm going to be happy, because that's going to be the biggest impact on the world immediately around me.
I think that's a lovely way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you.
For being here, and on behalf of the National Kidney Foundation, thank you for being one of our authors.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
it. A fascinating conversation. Thank you so very much, Gail and Walter. Now, speaking of the massive impact we can make on the world, that's what this event is about. Impact and also hope, plus creating a better future for those living with kidney disease. Our first vignette features patients, transplant recipients, and living donors. Let's take a look.
When I was first diagnosed, I think that I went through kind of the stages of, again, feeling overwhelmed, too much information. And then it became this exercise of, visits to the nephrologist really frequently, lab draws really frequently, and just watching the deterioration of my kidney function over time. And it really robbed me of my hope, and robbed me of my optimism, because it was just this march of bad news, more bad news, more bad news. And it was a really difficult time.
What makes me hopeful day to day is, well, one, I have a second chance at life. I realized that I could have died had I not gotten a kidney. The statistics aren't great. And then the other thing is just kind of going through that process, as difficult as it was for me. There are just so many amazing people who stepped forward, people that you don't even know that well, who will say, I will go through this for you, even though I don't know you that well. And so it just kind of gives you a sense that there's a lot of good people and with really big hearts who are willing to do amazing things.
What makes me hopeful about this event? I think that people who listen to Jane's story and, experience her courage, I think it's more likely to encourage other folks to consider donating kidneys.
The process is so simple. We've made so many advances. I have a tiny little scar. I was out of work for 4 weeks, but like I said, I left the hospital after 1 day. So my hope is that people can realize that, yes, it is major surgery, but the risks are low and the benefits are really, really, really high.
As a pediatric nephrologist, I get hope every day in seeing how my patients are thriving after having a transplant. I've had the great honor of seeing patients from the time that they were first diagnosed with kidney disease to going on dialysis, to seeing how their lives are changed after they receive a transplant.
I'm hopeful every day for the research that continues to be done so that we can figure out a way that we don't have people on wait lists for kidneys.
In terms of being a researcher in the kidney community, particularly now, it's been extremely exciting and hopeful because there are so many advances that are happening in kidney research in terms of finding new ways to study kidney disease, excitement of new ideas and approaches to treating kidney disease as well.
I've dedicated my life to helping patients, to helping other people live their best lives. And so that changed me as a man, that changed me as a person, that made me stronger, faster, more resilient. And it gives me so much confidence to be able to do many things out there. A lot of times when I'm faced with some type of adversity, some type of fear, I always tell myself, I've been through worse, I can get through this. And so that's what the fight is all about.
A big one is that public policy is changing around kidney disease. There is an acknowledgement that kidney disease is very much a disease of poverty and structural factors like structural racism. And that in being able to sort of tell the truth about what kidney disease is about, that we're able to really start tackling it in a more honest and productive way.
From a kidney transplant standpoint or a kidney disease standpoint, I see amazing changes with legislation. I think the National Kidney Foundation is doing a great job. I'm hopeful about creating change for the kidney community, and I think we have excellent resources to make that happen.
I really hope that over the course of my career, kidney care is going to look really different, and we're just going to fundamentally change how people access a kidney transplant and make it so much easier for people to access a kidney transplant.
Waking up with joy in my heart, with a grateful heart, being able to look out my window and know that there's an angel right there who saved my life.
That was beautiful. And yes, Cheryl, we're grateful, so very grateful for all the angels out there. And many of the angels, yes, you, our friends watching today, thank you for being with us. Hope is at the heart of today's event. Creating tomorrow's helping patients, helping patients to realize their dreams. And I know that together as a community, we have the power to do this. So now is your chance, friends, to support NKF's efforts and help to shape futures and help our friends thrive. So let's make sure we all know how to submit contributions. You can either do it by text. I think I mentioned earlier, literally grab your smartphone or use your streaming device. And you can, receive event messages by literally texting. I'm going to do this again. As you text a friend, grab your phone and you are going to text all one word, authors 21 to this number. So authors 21, it's all one word, to this number, 76278, 76278. I've already done it already. And then just follow the instructions. You'll get a text back, follow it through, and make your personal donation by following that link, and it will send you prompts on your phone. Pretty easy. But if you prefer to use your streaming device, we provided links and pinned them to the very top of the event chat. So if you go to the chat, you'll see a link right there. But if you run into any trouble, any problems, we're not going to let technology get in the way. You can submit questions to the chat, and the NKF team, they are there, they are waiting, and they will provide any assistance you may need. You can also go to the help desk in the sessions tab. All right, so hopefully, I hope we made that easy for you today. Okay, next, I am thrilled to bring you a conversation with Elizabeth Strout. Elizabeth is the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of, you may know these books, I'm sure you do, Olive Kitteridge, Olive Again, which was an Oprah Book Club pick, Anything is Possible, winner of the Story Prize. My name is Lucy Barton, the Burgess Boys, Abide With Me, and the award-winning Amy and Isabel. So many books. So she and Michael will talk about her newest bestseller, Oh, William. I've already picked it up. It's hard to put down. This is the book. Here's the conversation. Please welcome Elizabeth Strout and Michael Krasny.
I'm Michael Krasny, and I'm here with Elizabeth Strout. And Elizabeth Strout, let me indeed extend a warm welcome to you. National Kidney Foundation has been something I've been involved in for many years now, and delighted to have you, one of our premier American writers, with us and in conversation, and looking forward to talking to you about your work, and particularly about your newest novel, Oh, William, which I enjoyed immensely and certainly recommend to our listeners and to those who are joining us here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Very, very happy to be here. Thank you. Ever since I first received this invitation, I was really, really thrilled, because I think it's a wonderful thing that they're doing, and by bringing, you know, writers in and using this as a platform to get, I just find it really lovely, and I'm so appreciative to have been part of it.
Well, I guess the place to begin is, some would call this a sequel. Those who know your work from Olive Kitteridge, many, I think, know it from the television productions with Frances McDormand, but those who had the great pleasure and privilege of reading the Olive Kitteridge novels, or for that matter, reading the Lucy Barton novels, a name that always made me think a bit of Edith Wharton, I have to ask how you get into these characters. I mean, it seems like an obvious way to begin our conversation, but I know you really do get into them, not just like an alter ego. You kind of occupy them, or?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel like I do go into their bodies, actually, in a certain kind of way. I mean, you know, not really, but I do feel like I psychologically inhabit them just as much as I possibly can. So it's a matter of concentration, I think, is how I work. I just have to concentrate so hard and so intensely on being what I think this person is.
It's an alternate identity. It's a kind of avatar of sorts, isn't it? Something like that. You're out of the body and out of the mind, maybe both.
Yes, it's a strange thing, and it's sort of hard to describe. But the only thing I can, you know, say is to just repeat that I sit there and I just think, okay, I'm Lucy, or I'm Olive, or I'm, you know, Jim Burgess, or, you know, whoever I happen to be trying to be. It's just everything gets filtered out except for them.
Well, it's an amazing tour de force. It's a kind of ventriloquist tour de force, and I commend your work and give you the highest praise I can. I think with this new novel, if I may say so, and I want to focus on this to some extent, we have the main character trying to occupy her ex-husband and understand him, really.
Yes, exactly. You're absolutely right. So that's an interesting thing, because when I realized that I was going to write about William, her former husband, I understood really soon that it would have to come from Lucy's mouth, because that's who Lucy Barton is for the reader, and she is for me. She is her voice. And so I would have to write about William through her first person voice. And therefore, she is also trying to occupy William as well. So it's like, you know, a few layers.
She also really tries to understand her relationship with William. And in some ways, it almost supersedes her next husband and her relationship with him, this cello player from a Hasidic background,
Right.
rather exotic, if I may say so, CV, so to speak. But she seems to be driven by the fact that she felt safe with William and needs to understand what was it that made her feel safe.
Right. Exactly. Because her second husband, who's recently passed away, and I deliberately had her sort of stay away from him because she says at the very beginning, she's grieving her husband and she's going to talk about William. So, that sort of sets it up because she is in active grief for her second husband. But with William, she does begin to understand, oh yes, he was the only home I ever felt that I had, even though she loved her second husband very much. Obviously, to my mind, they had a really lovely relationship. And yet, what was it about William? Was it the fact that they had these girls together, or is it something about William? And then she finally realizes that he had some sort of what she thinks of as authority.
You mentioned Lucy's home. She comes from a pretty rough and tumble home, and there's a lot of violence and not much feeling of love and so forth. And there's a kind of mystery for the reader in that, because we see her as full of joy and spirit and all kinds of vitality.
Exactly. And that's how I always pictured Lucy. Even when I was writing My Name is Lucy Barton, I understood that she came from really, really a very hard and difficult beginning. And yet she was a person who, because I've seen this sometimes, there are people who they just survive and they bloom, even though they have come from very, very difficult backgrounds. And I thought that's who Lucy Barton is. I mean, her background obviously never leaves her, but she is born with a certain kind of spirit. And William recognizes that in her, and he has loved that about her. So, she's a funny one, Lucy.
If I may say, that's a kind of sanguine view. It's a very optimistic view, because let me go into this with you, because I think it's fascinating to me as a reader. She manages to rise above her class, and the same thing is true for William's mother. We discover playing golf and going to the Caymans and so forth. And yet, I don't want to do too many spoilers here, but the mother at one point calls her daughter-in-law trash, and is actually referred to as trash by someone else who comes in the picture, who I won't spoil with, but we'll call her the potato blossom queen, for lack of a better. So what I'm talking about here is the mobility of class, which you seem to.
Yeah. I've always been interested in class since my first book, Amy and Isabel, which was really a book about class that I didn't even fully understand until it was written. And I thought, oh, wow, this is actually about class. But I'm always writing about characters. So I'm always character driven. But yes, I am very aware that that when I was writing about Lucy, I'm fascinated. Like, what does it feel like to come from that kind of background and to end up, living a life in New York City and with enough money? And then with her mother-in-law, what we find out about her mother-in-law was, for me, really intriguing, because there's a whole nother story of somebody who did a similar thing, and yet at what price,
Well, it's also, I think, important in reading your novels for the reader to understand that although New York City plays an important role here and other works of yours, we're talking about kind of provincial Maine for the most part.
Very much.
And
very
that
much
kind of
rural.
setting made me think of a lot of American writers. I think of Sherwood Anderson, Winesburg, Ohio, going all the way up. But let's talk about how that world, as opposed to the big city, shapes up in your mind as a kind of binary, really.
Yes, it does, exactly. Well, I've written about Maine with Olive and stuff, but this particular book is even a different part of Maine. I mean, Maine is a large state, and if you go up even more northern, which Lucy and William do, it's even different from Krasny, Maine, which is the home of Olive, and it becomes far more rural and very different, and especially these days. And my husband and I took that exact trip ourselves. We drove up there to Holton, and we drove to Presque Isle and Fort Fairfield. We did the whole trip so that I could take my notes seriously. And it's an interesting place these days, because the mills are gone, and so what's left is there's a sadness, and yet a strange, haunting kind of beauty to it, is how I felt.
You mentioned your husband. He was, in fact, Attorney General of Maine, I believe. And
Yeah.
you were also trained as a lawyer. I think it'd probably be interesting for people who don't know about this biographical head note that I just gave, how that plays into your work, other than taking long trips with your husband.
Right. Well, my husband knows every inch of Maine, so that was a fun trip for him as well as for me. Yes, I did go to law school. I went because even though I knew that I was a writer, nobody was interested in my work at all forever. And so I thought that I'd go to law school. I thought I would do good work during the day and then come home and write at night. And it was a, misguided thing to think. But I went to law school. I dropped out. I wrote a very bad novel. I went back to law school. I finished. I was a lawyer for 6 months, and I was just an absolutely terrible lawyer, a very, very strikingly bad lawyer. And then I finally began to get a few stories published, and with the law degree was considered a graduate degree by the English department at Manhattan Community College. So I was able to become an adjunct at the English department at Manhattan Community College for years, and I loved teaching there.
And you always really wanted to be a writer, though, didn't you?
I knew that I was a writer.
You knew. How did you know that, or when did you know that?
Well, I was very, very young. I think, my mother gave me notebooks when I was really young. I mean, I had just begun to even write, and she gave me notebooks and she would say, write down what you did today. And so I would. And so from a very young age, I began to think in terms of sentences. And I would watch people. We never saw that many people because we lived very far away from people. But anyway, people were so interesting to me, so deeply interesting to me. And I just understood from a very young age that this is what I was. I was a writer. And it was a long haul before other people understood that as well.
Yeah, I remember reading something that you said. Actually, you said it in an interview that you saw someone once had on one color shoe and a house slipper on his other foot, or something along those lines. And immediately you were intrigued. You wanted to know who was this and where did he live and what was his story?
Right, exactly. And I made up a story about him. And I do that with people all the time. I always have, because I just, from my point of view, I've never seen anything more interesting in this world than people.
So where did Lucy come from, and where did Olive come from? I mean, what kind of catalyst?
Honestly, they're both kind of mysteries because they both showed up fully formed. Many of my characters kind of sidle up next to me and sort of, sit there or stand there or something for a while until I finally pay attention to them. But Olive showed up fully formed, and Lucy did as well. And so the truthful answer is I don't really know where they came from. I think that Olive Kittredge, she's a little more understandable for me because in my mind, there are many different people in Maine that I have known in my childhood who were Olive-like. I mean, they had different characteristics of Olive. So she's sort of a composite of many people that I have known. Lucy just showed up, and I saw Lucy and I realized, okay, she's going to come from sky. And that's when I realized she's going to come from the Midwest, and there's going to be sky all around this tiny, sad little house. And it was just there. And then off I went with her.
And you have given life to her, breathed life into her. And how do you feel about her? Because a lot of people are ambivalent about her. How do you feel?
Oh, well, I love her. And I also love Olive Kittredge. I mean, honestly, the truth is I love everybody that I write about, because one of the most wonderful things for me as a writer is that when I go to the page, I suspend all judgment. And so I don't care how badly behaved they are, and they do behave badly because people do, but Olive especially behaves quite badly at times. But I don't care as I'm writing about them. I'm just there to report on them. And that's very freeing for me to not be in judgment of the characters I write about.
Let's get back to O. William, because that's the novel that is being featured here, and that's the most recent novel. At one point, Lucy compares her relationship to Hansel and Gretel. We're talking about villainy and all that. Talk about that fairy tale element to relationships, but also the scary part of it. Yeah.
Right. And that was so interesting when that came to me, because I thought, oh, right. Even as they're taking this trip, there's an element of Hansel and Gretel to them. You see what I mean? There's an element of children going out into the woods and getting lost. And that when I realized that, I thought, oh, this is perfect, because it's a part of her sense of safety with him. It's a part of his authority, even though she acknowledges that it might not sound like it's a part of his authority. But that was just very interesting for me to find that piece as I was working on them.
And just one quick follow-up to that would be Bruno Bettelheim wrote a book called Uses of Enchantment, where he says fairy tales take us into sometimes dark places, but ultimately we come out of those dark places.
Yeah.
Part of your work and your vision.
Exactly. I would like to think that, yes. And that's why when I think of holding the reader's hand, and saying, come with me and I'll show you something that you should probably know this, but don't worry because I'll keep you safe. That's how I think when I'm thinking about the reader. If you see something, don't get afraid, because it'll be okay.
A great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Lovely to talk to you as well. Thank you so much.
Our thanks to Michael, and thank you, Elizabeth. Truly amazing. I'm actually in awe of how you bring your characters to life. And here it is. There's the book, Oh, William. Now, speaking of awe-inspiring, as a result of the author's luncheon going virtual, Gigi Nicholas became a sponsor and attended for the first time. She joined remotely from Indiana and invited her dear friend and fellow book club member, Jane Fuqua, to join her. Now, Jane was so moved by the story of Logan and Chris Blevins that she made a life-altering decision. I'll let them tell the powerful story in this video segment sponsored by Satellite Healthcare. Take a look.
My name is Jane Fuqua, and I live in Zionsville, Indiana. I was a stay-at-home mom with my 3 sons. My husband, Jack, he took a job here, and we moved here 20 years ago.
My name is Gigi Nicholas, and I live in Zionsville, Indiana. I run a small business, and it's through that business that I actually got involved with the NKF's Authors Luncheon, because I chose to become a sponsor for the event when it became virtual last year. I opted to purchase a table and invite a number of friends and family and spread the word about NKF.
So my friend Gigi invited me to the Book and Author Luncheon last year, and there was a man who spoke at that event named Chris Blevins, and Chris talked about donating a kidney to his young son. And in the days after the event, I kept thinking about that concept that you could donate a kidney and go on and live a normal life afterwards. And I just started wondering about it, and I wondered if somebody my age, almost 60, could donate a kidney. So I started looking around online at the requirements, and I decided I wanted to donate a kidney to a stranger.
I have to say that I was certainly taken aback and just blown away. But the more I thought about it, I wasn't surprised. It was so Jane. She just is always doing things for other people, and for her to step up her game to this level was amazing, but I realized completely natural for her.
A question that I was commonly asked when I was going through the process of getting tested and getting ready: have you had any second thoughts? Have you ever had a minute where you thought, oh, I'm afraid I don't want to do this? And no. And you're the one who said to me, right now that you've matched with someone, that person's family is calling all their relatives and telling them that he has a kidney, And I hadn't really thought of that until you pointed that out to me.
And that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about that. It's just, when you said, I've been matched with someone, I just imagined what those families are feeling.
I think that a lot of people don't even know that it's a thing that you can do, to do living donation. I've had people say to me, oh, if I knew that was something, I wish I'd known you could do that when I was younger. But it is the most valuable thing that I think I could have done with my life. I mean, I raised my kids. I think I was a good mom. I have a good marriage. But for the rest of my life, I will know that I reached out and helped this guy. And that's something I'm just never going to forget. The thing that has struck me the most, Gigi, about you inviting me to that luncheon was that small act of kindness where you reached out and invited us to go do that with you had life-changing effects for me. And you really just never know when one small thing you do for someone could have a big effect. My kidney donation would not have happened if it hadn't been for this Book and Authors Luncheon. And I know that last year was the first time it had ever been virtual. So I really do want to say to those who spend hours planning the event, and to the sponsors, and to all of you who are here attending with us today from all over the world, you make a difference. This event makes a difference.
We've all been through a really rough several years at this point, and we're all showing scars and bruises, and we're tired and worn out. But it's just so invigorating to know that there are so good people in the world. And I know that everybody who's attending this luncheon, you're good people. Everybody's trying to do something to make a difference. We're all working hard to find a way to make a difference. And the NKF is certainly one way that people are making that difference. When you have a family member who has kidney disease, you spend a lot of your time holding your breath, waiting for the results of lab work. Well, how does it look this month? Well, how does it look next month? And you never really quite know what's coming down the pipe. To receive the gift that Jane gave and that others can give is to be free of that, to be able to plan your future and to know and be confident that things are going to be good in the future. And there's just no gift like that. Thank you, Jane.
Our thanks to Jane. What an inspiration you are. And friends, it is now your chance to support the National Kidney Foundation's efforts and help change more lives, and you can. And so many of you have. Thank you from us all to those who've already grabbed their phone, made that donation. And I'm looking at the total right now. This is so exciting. We're at just over $16,000 raised during this luncheon so far, this virtual gathering. So if you've not yet had a chance to give, now is the moment. And I love it when I can share good news. I have great news, actually, because today we're extremely fortunate to have a generous friend of NKF who will match your donations dollar for dollar up to $20,000. So we got to move the needle here if we can. Imagine that match of $20,000. That means your donation will make twice the impact. It'll double your giving and have twice the impact for NKF. And to add additional motivation, for gifts of $500 and above, you'll get a full set of today's featured books. So the books, all part of our luncheon today, you will get a full set, okay? And I just want to kick off by saying, I'm going to give a $500 donation on behalf of myself and my partner, Rick, in memory of his father, Manny. So if you'd like to join us, your $500 donation will go a long way, and you get a set of books as well. So some giving, and you get to read. All right. So Manny, this one for you. All right. Keep the giving. Let's do it together. I know we can. We want to get that match. We want to unlock it, and we can only unlock it when we get to $20,000, and we're just a few $1,000s shy. I'll give a couple of little shout outs also. Why not? Brad Murdoch. Hi, Brad. Thank you for your generosity. Gigi, thank you, Gigi, so much. To Jeffrey Runners, thank you. Karen Schwartz, thank you. Judith Weber, thank you. Friends, you make a donation. You can be anonymous, but put your name in there. I may give you a little shout out, and we'll do more shout outs. We'll update our totals in the next segment. Now, Mary Roach is the author of 5 New York Times bestsellers. I love the titles. Are you ready? Stiff, Bonk, Gulp, Grunt, and Packing for Mars, and has been deemed by the Washington Post, and I'll go along with this, America's funniest science writer. She is the funniest science writer. She's also written for National Geographic, Wired magazine, and the New York Times magazine, and her TED Talk made the TED 20 most watched list. It is fascinating. In her newest book, Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law, she explores points of friction between humans and wildlife and raises the question, when dealing with criminal wildlife, will humans choose to be the problem or the solution? So friends, here we go. Please welcome Mary Roach, and once again, the delightful Gail Tsukiyama.
Thank you, Liam, for having us here today. I'm here with Mary Roach, New York Times bestseller of 7 books, 8 books. What is it?
7. 7.
7 books. Stiff, Spook. I love this. Bonk, Gulp, Grunt. Packing for Mars? Where'd that one come from? And her latest book, Fuzz. Mary, my friend.
Hi, Gail.
We've known each other for years now, haven't we? And so I've been able to ride along with the ride that Mary has gone for several of her books, and heard about the process. And I can't believe that she is this best-selling writer that has such a great life when it comes to writing books, because she's always off somewhere researching it. And I never wondered what actually happens in that researching process. And so we'll talk about a little bit about fuzz and the research process and your favorite animal and how, your favorite stories from that. But I realized that I never asked you about your childhood. And were you always a little science writer? Did you always want to be were you a little girl with science books stacked up and reading?
Well, I thought you were going to say, were you always so weird? Well, I wasn't ever like a science buff in terms of my academics, but I have this memory of being in 5th grade, and I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire called Etna, and my neighbor and I had this thing that we did one winter called the potted meat experiments, where we made little potted meat sandwiches, and one of them we hung from a tree, and one of them we buried, and another we put on the snow, and we would go around with a clipboard and we would take notes, and we didn't have a thesis and we didn't know what we were investigating. We were like looking for tracks to see if animals came, and I don't know, we were just playing scientists being out in the field. And I look back at that, and I guess that is significant in some way, but I do remember all those, those experiments that they have you do. And, I took home a microscope at one point. I was pretty excited about that. And, that experiment where you have to keep an ice cube from melting for as long as you can by like wrapping it in things. And those memories stayed with me for some reason. So I think kind of the fun and process of science always appealed to me. It was definitely more in middle grade than in high school, when things started to go all, formulas and multisyllabic words.
But your career was as a journalist, right? Your starting career when you began. So you were always a writer in that sense of journalism. And, did you? I guess I shouldn't even. I should know this, but what did you major in?
I majored in psychology, but only because the psychology department was really lax about transferring credits. So I wanted to go my junior year abroad. I just wanted to be gone for the whole year. And the psychology department would sign off on just about anything. I went to some crappy polytechnic in London, just because I could fulfill the credits for the psychology major by taking classes there. And the English department wouldn't let me do that. So I'm like, okay, I'm a psychology major. For that,
your wanderlust started early.
Yes.
Your love of travel started.
My love of travel. That was exactly right. Yeah.
So when did you become a science writer?
Well, kind of by accident. I started out writing for the San Francisco Examiner Sunday magazine, Image, which doesn't exist anymore, and just doing general feature writing. But then my editor went to this magazine called Hippocrates, which was medicine and health, but really fun takes on that. And I was able to travel for a lot of those stories. The first feature story I ever did for them, they sent me to the British Common Cold Unit, where some woman would come and drip a cold virus up your nose. And then every day the snot nurse would come, and you'd have to petri dish, kind of like plug into the petri dish for the snot nurse. And you'd have to, and it was kind of amazing in light of COVID, in that we had to stay 30 feet apart from other people when we went out for our walks. So you'd have a string stretched between you so you wouldn't transfer the virus, so that you wouldn't contaminate the experiment, because some people got the virus and some people didn't. And so it kind of, I thought I was reminded of that during COVID with all the social distancing.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So it just kind of fell into your lap, all of this.
Yeah. So yeah. And then when I was writing for Hippocrates, an editor from Discover contacted me and with an assignment, and these were stories that I found really interesting. They often involved some travel and just science itself is kind of a foreign land for me. And going and spending time in someone's weird laboratory somewhere is interesting. I think when I met you, I was in the Indian military science laboratory where they were testing leech repellents. Do you remember? I
remember the chilies.
Yeah. Well, oh, right. I did too. I was doing two things. But I was also reporting on it was a chili thing, but they were also testing a leech repellent. And that's where I got the idea for Grunt, was when I was in that lab where they were.
I actually was going to ask you about the whole series of books that you've written. And, they're all different subject matters. They're quirky, but they're interesting. They're sciencey, but it isn't science. And actually, there's so many things I want to ask, because when I was reading Fuzz, I was thinking of voice and how different it is, because as fiction writers, we create voices. We create characters and we think to ourselves, well, this is how this character will sound. This is how this character responds to things. And then I read your book and I'm thinking, oh, that's Mary. And I would be so scared to actually have my own voice in a book, in a way, because I've spent all these years creating voices, creating people. Elizabeth Strout said that she writes characters and she gets into those characters and she doesn't care if they're bitches. That's the character. But you're writing your books from Mary Roach. Is it at any time, well, you have a background in journalism, so I'm sure you're not making that crossroads that I'm feeling when I'm reading and thinking, oh, this is really Mary talking, in a lot of ways. Is it the first book? Was it easy to sit down and say, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to have all this stuff in there?
Yeah, it's easy. See, I look at what you do and I think, my God, she creates people out of nothing. She's like God.
Yes.
She gives life to these characters and they have personalities, complex personalities and interrelationships and these whole worlds that you build around them. Whereas I rely on the crutch of reality. I'm going, it's nothing easier than writing from your own voice.
That's true. Plus, you are given such great characters within your researching. These experts, for instance, some of them, you can't make them up.
No, that's right. The key is taking the time to find a setting and character. I'm looking for, I want there to be character and setting and but I have to find it in reality. So, and my books are only ever as good as the people that I find and the situations that I step into. So I spend a fair amount of my time contacting people, trying to find something interesting and getting a sense of them. And of course, I know until I meet them in person what they'll really be like. But they become my characters.
I know, really. Well, let's take a step back then. You're talking about when you find these experts. How do you find your subject matter? How do you decide that, I've always equated, and you probably write your books faster than I write mine. So I've always equated finding my story kind of like a relationship, a mini marriage. I have to find a subject matter that I'm willing to stay with for the period of time. How do you go about finding your subject matter for all these wonderful books?
Because it has to be something that you're going to be excited about and interested in for 2 or 3 years. So choose wisely, Grasshopper. It's really...
Well, okay. Well, how did you start? Your first book was it Spook?
Yeah. Stiff was the first one.
Yeah, Stiff. Yeah. How did you come upon thinking to yourself, I'm going to write this book about cadavers?
I'll tell you, because it didn't seem like a good idea to me. In fact, I stumbled onto the topic. I like to spend time in weird parts of libraries where the sections nobody goes into. Like at UCSF Medical School Library has a basement full of books from the 1800s and the early 1900s that are way out of date. and no one else is ever down there. But I like to go down there and poke around for ideas. And I found this set of volumes called the STAP Car Crash Conference. And it was the early days of automotive safety where they were trying to figure out how to make cars safer, because nobody had given any thought to that. There were no seat belts. People were smashing into the steering wheel and having like the name of the car imprinted on their chest. I mean, it was horrific the way cars were just built to be beautiful. There wasn't any thought given to safety. And then gradually people started thinking about that. So the Car Crash Conference was people trying to figure out how do we make these cars safer? And cadavers came into play because, at a certain point up at over 30 miles per hour, like the researcher isn't going to get on the crash sled. You need those people that don't feel anything. So cadavers were used to calibrate the first crash test dummies. And I found that interesting. And I wrote about it for salon.com because I had a column for salon.com. And this agent, who is still my agent, contacted me and said, do you ever think about a book? He had just read some of my columns. And I said, no, I don't know. I write 2,000 words and that's kind of it. He said, well, he asked which columns had the highest hit rates, because this was salon.com and you could actually learn that often depressing fact of how many people had read it. And there were that column and a couple of other cadaver related columns had high hit rates. And he suggested, why don't you think about that? And I remember saying, that's a terrible idea for a book. Who goes into a bookstore, looks at this whole shelf of new books and says, oh, this one about, that's the one I'm going to buy. I thought it sounded like a terrible idea. He said, well, think about it. And so I wrote a little, 2-page treatment, kind of, sort of, got my toes wet. And then he encouraged me to write a full proposal. And so it was really, I think of that as our book, because it really was his urging and his encouragement, sense that this would be something that publishers would be interested in and that readers would buy. I seriously just didn't think anyone would buy it, read it, like it. I mean,
and you were so wrong.
Anyway,
you were so wrong and you wrote it. I love that you write what you write. I love that you grace us with your books. Thank you so much for being here on behalf of the Kidney Foundation Authors Luncheon.
Thank you, Gail.
Can't wait to see your next book.
I'm so honored to be a part of I know the Kidney Foundation lunches. You've talked about them, and over the years I've heard about them and heard of authors being on them. So I was really honored to be on part of the lineup, and because it's such an important cause, and it's such amazing work that they do, and so I'm delighted to have been here. So thanks to everyone for tuning in and for supporting the research, and thank you, Gail, for taking time to look at my book and talk to me. And
I would have talked to you anyway, but this is even nicer.
Yeah, well.
My word, so good. Can't put the book down. Thank you so very much, Gail and Mary. And here's Mary's latest book, Fuzz. Part of the books we'll be giving you if you make a donation today. And, I have to say, friends, one of the things I love about this annual event is the diversity of the authors and the journeys that they take us on through their books. And talking of journeys, next you get to meet Valen Kiefer, who was diagnosed at a young age with polycystic kidney disease. Her path has led her to advocate for organ donation, helping other patients on their journey. So, sponsored by Otsuka Pharmaceuticals US, this video shares her own personal story.
Our stories connect one another. They inspire us. They give us hope. They make us feel not alone. And I didn't have those stories when I was younger. And for me, I'm so passionate about sharing what I've been through. I see how it connects all of us. Here today, the authors are telling about their stories that have been in their heart and what inspires them. We're hearing other kidney patient stories, and I think it helps us live a more fulfilling and joyful life. I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease when I was 10 years old. I was at the pediatrician for a normal checkup and I had sky-high blood pressure of 160 over 140. At the time, being so young, I didn't even know what PKD was. But of course, with my mother having the disease and our family being deeply impacted, she knew. And she knew that high blood pressure is a side effect of PKD, as well as my doctor. So they immediately sent me for an ultrasound. Both of my kidneys were polluted with cysts, and at that time I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. I vividly remember the car ride home. My dad was driving, my mom was crying, I was in the back seat, and I was too young to understand the gravity of what just happened to me. I had no idea what this diagnosis would entail and how it would deeply impact my future. I felt very different and alone. I couldn't participate in sports. I had to sit on the sideline in gym class, and 2 months into college is when things got really, really bad. I started to have cyst bleeds, went into the emergency room, and then I became inpatient in the hospital for about a year. I had both of my kidneys removed, and I knew that in order for me to have a better future, it would take receiving a kidney transplant. And I was actually too sick to be put on the transplant waiting list, and I needed a living kidney donor to survive. And things were really different back then. You didn't have social media. You couldn't do campaigns to get a transplant. And I was deathly ill and inpatient in the hospital, so I couldn't even advocate for myself at the time. There were moments I was living minute to minute, hour to hour, and I almost couldn't even see a future, let alone think somebody would step forward and save my life. So I remember the day that I was sitting on my parents' couch and the phone rang and my living kidney donor, Sally, called and said she was a match. And it gives me goosebumps to even say it. I remember this weight lifted off of my shoulder, and for the first time I thought to myself, I have a future. I can dream. This is going to get better. And it was that pivotal moment that I had hope. And I'll never forget when I woke up from the kidney transplant, I felt more alive than I had ever felt. I think you don't even realize how sick you are and how sick you feel. And then all of a sudden you receive that peace that you need, and it's a whole new life before you. And I had not been that happy or felt that alive my entire life. Me sharing my story is very therapeutic for me. It has this boomerang effect. I'm not only inspiring others, but it inspires me because it gives purpose to the pain that I've been through. It gives a reason for all that I've endured. And for me, I think people sometimes go through their whole life striving to find their purpose in life. And I feel lucky to have found mine. And now I've shared my story over 100 events across North America. It has just become a part of who I am. And every day I wake up and it's like, what can I do to help other people? And then the speaking led to writing, and I found out my love of writing. And now I've written hundreds of articles published by nonprofits. And now today I've raised over $1.3 million for PKD research. I often wondered, where does this passion come from? Why is it just in my soul to do this? My mom isn't outspoken, my brother isn't. We have an extremely small family because everyone passed away young. Well, a couple years ago, my mom dug up some old pictures, and it was of her mother, my grandmother, Mickey, and she was volunteering for the National Kidney Foundation. It was pictures of her putting things in envelopes. She was at bake sales. She was doing all of this volunteering, and I was completely stunned. I never met my grandmother. She passed away before I was born. I never really knew anything about her. And here only a couple years ago, I'm learning that she was a passionate volunteer. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's my first connection to my grandmother. And for me, it makes me even more passionate because I feel like I'm honoring her and keeping her legacy alive by the efforts that I do.
Our thanks there to Valine for sharing a very personal story, a full circle moment of grandmother discovering that connection to NKF, and Valine living to share her story and doing great work. Feline, thank you so very, very much. Friends, the gifts are coming in thick and fast. We thank each and every one of you for being with us today and for grabbing your phone and texting to give. I do want to just mention to some of our friends who are on T-Mobile or Sprint, unfortunately, we can't do that text to give the way we were hoping to. So you will actually, we'll encourage you instead to go to the screen using your computer, your desktop, and just click on the link there. That will enable you to still make a donation and still give. So sorry to our T-Mobile or Sprint fans, but our Sprint friends, you still have a way to give though. So we thank you for your generosity in advance. And we have another incentive to give. You know, we unlocked that first match of $20,000. Yes, we did. All thanks to you. And I told you, we've just, we unlocked it. Yes, we have. But thanks to our generous sponsor, V4 Pharma, we will match an additional $10,000. And here's the great news. We're almost at $30,000. So we unlocked the 20, another 10, and we just have another $1,500 or so, and we can unlock that additional 10. So here's the good news. Great news. If we get to 30,000, and we're almost there, so grab your phone right now. If you've not had a chance to make a donation, make that donation or go to your desktop if you're Sprint or T-Mobile and make your donation on your desktop if you can. And that $30,000 will unlock it. And so that $30,000 becomes $60,000. And that's what we've done here together today. I know we can do it. So thank you to each and every one of you for supporting NKF and for showing up big time for our community. All right. And also a big thank you to V4 as well. And a reminder to all of those who give $500 or more, here's a little something to motivate you, $500 or more, and you'll get the book set. Yes, you will. Not just one, but two full sets of books from our featured authors. So, you know, holidays just around the corner, perfect gift. I know that I'm going to be giving passing on my books that I received for the donation. So grab your phone, make that donation. And for those who give $250, we will, of course, return your gift with a big hug of love and also 3 books from today's authors. All right. A couple of quick shout outs. Kathy Merritt, thank you. Holly Michaelis, thank you. Bonnie Minette, thank you. Jeanette Moir, thank you. Thank you so much to Renee Nelson. And friends, we are literally $1,500 away from unlocking that $30,000, which becomes 60. So we're going to double your impact today. All right. So keep the giving going. And friends, today you are helping to make better tomorrows. Your gifts are changing lives. They really are. For that, we thank you so very, very much. Okay, so let's do this. I know we can. Now, for our final conversation today, let's welcome Amor Towles, best-selling author of A Gentleman in Moscow, which, by the way, spent 2 years on the New York Times bestsellers list, and Rules of Civility, which was named by the Wall Street Journal as one of 2011's best books of the year. Collectively, his books have sold more than, are you ready for it? 4 million copies. 4 million. And they've been translated into more than 30 languages, which is quite extraordinary. So today, he will be talking with Michael about his newest novel released in October and already a New York Times bestseller. It's The Lincoln Highway. Friends, please welcome Michael Krasny and Amor Towles.
Well, I'm delighted to be once again with Amor Towles, who I had the privilege of interviewing once on air. It was actually a live broadcast from Oakland, and we did an on-stage interview for City Arts and Lectures. And I've been an admirer and appreciator of his work for a number of years. This is pretty much regarded as the third novel. I say that because he also has other publications to reckon with, but in terms of novels, this is the third one. He seems to be on a 5-year plan. The first one, Rules of Civility, the second, Gentleman in Moscow, and now this, and they are separated by about 5 years each, roughly. All New York Times bestsellers, all highly regarded works, and works that have become really, not yet Lincoln Highway, but it's certainly on its way, major works of American literature and works in our canon. It's rare to have an author who is as successful and in terms of selling books and being as appreciated and as venerated, but also an author who has done so well in terms of being seen by the higher lights, as they like to think of themselves in the literary world, as being a very serious writer and a writer to reckon with in terms of philosophy and ideas and storytelling in general. So it's a pleasure to be with him. Let me just say by way of introduction that he was educated at Yale and Stanford. He had a career in finance for a couple of decades. He always wanted to be a writer, but that was to some extent delayed by, well, I suppose, making sure that he had a roof over his head and food on the table for family and all of that. I admire him a great deal as a writer. It's, again, really a delight to be in conversation with him once again. And let me officially welcome you, Amor Towles, to the National Kidney Foundation.
Thank you, Michael. And after that introduction, I should excuse myself because it's not going to get better than that. But
well, it doesn't get better than the Lincoln Highway in many ways as well. I mean, but this is, let's talk first about what a different book this is. All your books are different, but you go from a kind of post-Jazz Age work in Rules of Civility to Count Rostov, who many became familiar with, living in Metropole in Moscow. These are very different books, named, by the way, for a Tolstoy character, I believe. And now we're in a road trip. We're in an odyssey. We're in a journey novel, very kind of in some ways archetypical novel in that sense, at least in terms of genre. What inspired you here? What got you started?
Michael, I've been writing fiction since I was a kid. And so I have a whole pile of ideas that I would like to pursue as books in various stages of development. So when I finish a project, like A Gentleman in Moscow, and I'm looking across these piles, trying to decide where I'm going to spend the next 5 years, as you noted, it's sort of a natural desire to shift. You know, as you say, I had just finished a 5-year period of my life with, you know, a central character who's in late middle age, trapped in a hotel, but telling a 30-year story. And so looking across the piles, I immediately wanted to kind of go and tell this story of these 3 young 18-year-olds who are on their way from from Nebraska to New York City in what is a 10-day tale. And it's set in the mid 50s and starts in Nebraska. And if I think about that shift, you know, it's not just for because I'm looking for change myself from an entertainment standpoint. It's really because the shift forces me to retool all the aspects of my narrative craft. And in this transition, probably the biggest shift is the one from the 30 years to the 10 days. Because in a 30-year story, I have the opportunity as the writer, you hopefully have the opportunity as a reader to watch and experience the evolution of a character and his relationships. We see the Count change over time. We see a quick romance turn into a seasoned relationship with Anna Urbanova. We see his sort of babysitting job with a 5-year-old girl turn into parenthood. We see his colleague relationships in a restaurant become deep friendships. And the world is changing as well. In a 10-day story, you don't have the freedom to build that into the narrative, you know, in an easy way. So the challenge really is to take this 10-day window of these 18-year-olds, a glimpse of their lives, and give some sense of the past that they're coming from, and some sense of the future that they're headed towards, but all through that narrow aperture. And that is a very different narrative task, and that's the fun for me because it requires a different type of storytelling.
A very challenging narrative task and a different type of storytelling, which made it sort of de rigueur for you to use different points of view. You mentioned 3 teenagers, but you also have a young brother here who figures in this in a very central way. But let's talk about how you shift points of view in ways that are very deft and able, and it's not necessarily easy to do. There's a character named Duchess who perhaps is one of the most explosive and volatile characters, to be sure. But you're talking from his perspective, first person. Otherwise, you're omniscient, but you're in the minds of, you're actually occupying, taking over the minds and consciousness of these other characters. How does that work for you as an author?
I'm very interested in tone of voice, perspective within the realm of elements of craft in storytelling, in the novel in particular. I'm very interested in how tone of voice affects the writing of a chapter or a book. And what I mean by that is that, because you're right, even when I'm doing third person Emmett or third person Wooly, just as in Gentleman in Moscow, which was a third person narrative, it's a very close third person to that character. And again, in terms of a challenge, when I'm doing that, what I'm trying to do is to take the personality of that individual, what they've been through in their lives, what they hope for in their lives, and all the sort of the virtues and vices they have, and to build it into a voice so that when they speak or when they describe a room that they enter, when they describe a person they meet, through the way they are talking or through the way they are thinking, we can hear who they are. And that's what's interesting to me, because of course it means, again, as you go from chapter to chapter, they almost have to use a different vocabulary for each character, a different semantics, a different poetics to bring that personality to life. And when you do that, it shapes sort of their moral view, it shapes what their actions are, it shapes their friendships, all those things kind of come out of it. And that's a lot of fun for me, to try to make sure I've got that tone correctly. And yes, in a way, this is my most challenging book in that sense, because really nailing Katie's voice in Rules of Civility or nailing the Count's voice in Joe in Moscow is central to the success of those books. Here, I've got to get 8 voices right. And really hope that the reader, as they shift from one voice to another, they can feel that change, that they don't lose track of where they are in the story. You want it to be cumulative, so that as another character is speaking, they don't feel like I've lost track of things or that it's becoming confusing, but that somehow it is building into the momentum of their experience with the narrative to see another point of view, to hear a different voice and a different way of seeing the world, really.
Well, it's hard enough to sustain one voice often in novels, so congratulations on what you've achieved here. I'm also wondering about some of the serious motifs that you work with, because you are a philosopher in many respects, if I may say so. In fact, I was just having a conversation recently for another great cause that I'm involved in and believe in, the Humane Society, with Jennifer Egan, Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist and author of many novels, including Visit from the Goon Squad. We're talking about how novelists used to be asked all kinds of questions and hold forth on all kinds of ideas. And that doesn't seem to be a phenomenon that we have as much as we did, let's say, at the turn of the century or the 19th century. And yet you're one of those novelists who has that capacious, overriding view that really should be tapped into. What you tap into here is myth and storytelling itself. Let's have you sort of opine on that, what you were after here.
Yeah, I think the starting place, I'd say, is that if you think of the journey story, and we can call it a road story if you want to, which are versions of the same thing. The journey story is as old as storytelling itself. And if we look back to the earliest great stories, they often are journey based. And whether that's the Odyssey, which is obviously Ulysses headed home, the Aeneid is a journey story, Don Quixote is ultimately a journey story. And one of the things I think is fascinating about the road as a motif in storytelling and in life is that it can mean different things in different contexts. So the road can be the journey home, as in the case of Ulysses and the Odyssey. It can be the journey outward to start something new, as in the case of the Aeneid, where Aeneas is leaving destroyed Troy and going to start Rome, ultimately. But it can also be a story in which something occurs on the road itself that is fateful, like as in the case of Oedipus. Oedipus goes out and at the crossroads runs into a stranger, fights with him. It turns out to be his father, and he kills him, and all the tragedy comes out of that. I'm sorry if you don't know the end of Oedipus, but that's what happens. You should know by now, audience. But at any rate, so the story, the road can be each of these things. It can be the journey outward into the new. It can be the journey home and into the past. It can be an event at the crossroads, which is fateful. And what was fun in this narrative, because you do have these, 3 young men and a young woman who are kind of all in motion, is that we kind of I get to explore each version of it. We have a character who's very interested in going home. We have a character who is very interested in starting his life anew. And we have a character who definitely has fateful events on the road itself. And so it's a way of me kind of taking this sort of mythological tradition, which then got kind of interpreted again in the novel in the 19th and 20th century, and then bringing it kind of up to date in my terms. If we think of it from a novel standpoint, of course, you've got Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, which is really a road journey on Route 66, in the post, sort of the end of the Depression. Melville, Moby Dick, is a journey novel. It just happens to be on a boat instead of a car. And I think probably the novel in the American canon that's closest to the work of the Lincoln Highway is Accidentally Dying, which is Faulkner's great story about a group of siblings who are bringing the body of their mother, in her coffin, home to her hometown, so she can be buried in the family plot. And that story largely takes place in that journey, as you know, as these young people are taking her home, and that story is told from multiple perspectives. So in a way, Lincoln Highway is a distant cousin to that book, I suppose. But yes, there's sort of a pleasure in taking up this traditional thread that goes back to the mythic times, and then gets reinterpreted in the novel, and then to bring it here into Lincoln Highway as an exploration of the bigger philosophical scope of what is the journey for us. You know, what is, and to what degree does it define how we are going through the becoming process.
Yeah, I thought of Addie Budron and that whole burial and Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. You evoke that, but you even go to a rather able way of evoking other things like the Three Musketeers and there are central, and the Odyssey, of course. There are central intertextual things interwoven into this book that I think will compel readers, especially those readers who are well-read and literary and enjoy that kind of intertextuality. Tell us a little bit about why we ought to care about these characters. These are, I mean, they're not bad boys, but they're boys who have been in correction institution. I mean, to some extent, not necessarily in ways that make them all that culpable. In fact, the main character, Emmett, is someone who's pretty honorable and virtuous for the most part, and gets a bad deal. Chance goes against him. But I'd like to know, because you care about these characters, why we should care about them.
I think the experience of being 18 or around then is very universal, and that sort of moment in time where we are about to define our own futures. You know, we take control of that. When we're younger, our parents are overseeing the process of setting our goals and defining what is right and wrong for us and laying out ambitions for us. You know, our church does that, our community does that. The schooling that we go through does that to some degree. All this stuff is shaping us, and suddenly at the age of 18, we are in charge of it ourselves, and we recognize that. It's very exciting, exhilarating to realize that the coming decades are my own to define. I can decide who I am, what I want from life, what I'm capable of, what I think is right and wrong. And at that moment in time, we consciously or unconsciously will adopt some of and amplify some of those lessons we learned as a younger person. We will reject others consciously or unconsciously as we sort of determine our future. And I think that part of the reason, I think that people are going to find when they read this book, they do connect to the characters very quickly, and probably because that's such a universal experience. You know, that they'll be able to feel, hopefully, that sense of both the burden or the advantage of the youth as a foundation, but then all the uncertainty and excitement of the possibilities looking ahead, and hopefully that they'll bond. Now, one of the interesting things that's been fun in seeing the book roll out and seeing response from readers is that the different characters are very different. As you said, Emmett is sort of an honorable kid from the Midwest and expresses some of the Midwestern values that are quite common, whereas Duchess is kind of from a tougher part of New York City, and his father was sort of a Shakespearean who fell on hard times and became a vaudevillian doing Shakespearean monologues, and ends up kind of a drunk and a con man. And Woolley kind of grew up on the Upper East Side and went to boarding school, and has had the finer things. And so they kind of come from three different backgrounds, and there's sort of three different versions of American youth. And so that kind of shapes also how they see the future. And what's been fun is to see how readers connect, because I will have readers who say, oh, Emmett, I loved him from the first page. And you'll have a reader say, oh, I love Duchess from the first page. And that's fascinating because that says a lot about them, right? Is that they're coming from an angle of America, that makes them sort of see an allegiance with one of these different characters, depending upon their background.
Well, it's always a delight to talk to you, always illuminating and engaging, to put it mildly. And congratulations on this book. I certainly recommend it to people. They will be captivated by it, as I was. And always, as I say, a delight to be in conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael, and good luck to everybody. And thanks for having me. But more importantly, thanks to the NKF for doing this important work. Thanks, everybody.
Well, what a wonderful way to end the day. A massive thank you to Michael, and of course to Amor Towles. Here's the book, The Lincoln Highway, one of the four featured books today. So our thanks to them so very, very much. And of course, thanks to our authors, all our authors, for all the joy that your books bring. A lot of inspiration today from our authors to our speakers, and of course, all of you for your immense generosity. We thank you so very, very, very much. And of course, I love how this event bridges the gap and marries our love of literature and books and giving back to the NKF community. So let's check in one last time to see how close we are to our match goal. And so, are you ready? A virtual drum roll, please, everybody. And we have raised, with our match included, more than $70,000. We're able to unlock that $30,000 match, sponsored by V4 Pharma, and of course our wonderful donor. We thank you so very, very much. So let's keep on giving. You can give, today, tomorrow, next week, but now's the time. If you've not yet, please, one more time, grab your phone, make that donation. And if you know someone in your family, a friend, extended family member, you want to give in memory of, or someone you know who's being challenged right now, give that donation and think of that person. Every single dollar you donate matters. Every gift counts, and we cannot thank you enough. Don't forget also about the silent auction. I've got to mention this one, a virtual cooking class for you and your friends. You can bid on that with rockstar chef Elizabeth Faulkner. I'll be a part of the class. I'm going to make a knockout cocktail. So whoever bids on this, gather some friends. Maybe it's a birthday. Maybe just get the whole family together. But Chef Elizabeth Faulkner being zoomed into your home. She'll give you cooking tips, great recipes. It'll be a lot of fun as well. We also have a trip to Tahoe. We have a wine package from our good friends, J Law. Thank you, J Law, so very much. And of course, our thanks to Book Passage. Thanks to them, you can buy books for every person on your holiday gift giving list. Book Passage, they're the best. And we thank them so very, very much. All of them, all our sponsors are helping us, along with you, make a difference. So thank you from the bottom of our collective hearts. And now it's time to wrap it up. We want to thank our authors for generously donating their time today, for taking time for the conversations. So thanks to Walter Mosley, Mary Roach, Elizabeth Strout, and Amor Towles. Also, massive thanks to Gail Tsukiyama and our beloved Michael Krasny. We thank you. We thank you so very, very much. Shidi Nicholas, Jane Fuqua, Valen Kiefer, thank you for sharing your stories of inspiration. I know you inspired a lot of giving. We cannot thank you enough for that. And of course, to all of our sponsors, thank you. It takes a village. To our volunteers and the staff of NKF. Big, 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 big hug of love to all of you for all that you do, not just on this day, but year round. We thank you. And of course, we thank all of you for joining us and for your amazing generosity. So, friends, just a couple of facts to know. 37 million people in America are living with kidney disease. 100,000 more. Number one more time, 100,000 more are waiting for a kidney transplant. Today, please know you've made a massive difference in their lives. And as a reminder, that silent auction, book sales, and wine sales, they'll close at 6 o'clock. So you have time still to log on and place your bid until 6 o'clock tonight. And friends, that concludes this year's virtual program. But before we close, this event was dedicated to Alan Mendelsohn, a champion for kidney patients everywhere, as mentioned earlier by Gail. And we're thinking of Alan today. Thank you, friends. Once again, we look forward to seeing you in person. Wouldn't that be great? Next year for the 34th Annual Authors Luncheon. Let's do it together, shall we? But please, right now, go to the sessions area for the after party. I'm going to pop in there as well. You can connect with friends from the NKF and learn about living those. I could have mentioned also, when you go into that special sessions area, you want to unlock your camera so people can see you and we can have a little conversation. So don't forget to unmute and also unlock your camera. So when you go into the sessions area, we can actually see each other and have a conversation. You can also learn more about donations, a living donation. And I hope we have another story to tell like Jane's next year. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You made a difference today. Changing lives, saving lives. That's what NKF is all about. You made it happen. So one last time, a hug of love from our collective hearts to you. Thank you. I'm Liam Maitland. We'll see you in person next year. Cheers.